friends. I hope you have had a good couple of weeks. I think most of you are back in school, whether that's virtually or in person. I hope it's going well so far. You guys are almost there through this school year. Hopefully, I'm having hope that this will be the last semester of this kind of school for you guys. And hopefully the fall will be a fresh new school year. So we've been in our series Vibes talking about emotions, and with emotions, have you ever heard about road rage? If you have your license, you've probably experienced it personally. If not, you've maybe been in the car with someone who has felt rage while driving. If you haven't experienced road rage, maybe you've encountered hallway rage, which I'm making up right now. But it would be whenever you're in the hallway between classes, someone bumps into you and maybe makes you drop your phone, and in turn you just let them have it, or maybe at least in your head you do. For me, it would be like in the grocery store aisle rage is what I would call it. But whether road rage, hallway rage, grocery store aisle rage, we've all experienced that kind of rage. And sometimes we don't even like to call it rage or even anger. We will just say we're frustrated. And I think it's because we don't like to think of ourselves as angry, but honestly, isn't anger and frustration kind of the same thing, like road rage and road frustration? And so like I said, we've been in this series Vibes. We're talking about emotions. And I think one emotion that definitely can get the best of all of us and really have control of us is anger. So the thing about anger is it doesn't always look the same. Sometimes it means yelling at someone or losing your temper. And I think that's what we normally think of when we think of anger, but it can also mean giving someone the silent treatment. You know what I'm talking about? It is absolutely the worst. Sometimes when someone's mad at you and they just don't say a word at all. I personally think it's way worse because I almost would rather us just confront the anger in the room. But maybe you're really good at giving people the silent treatment. Not only is it a way for you to process your anger, but it's also a way for you to control the situation. You hold the power because you withhold the words. And making it all more complicated, not all anger is bad. There's the anger we feel when we see injustices, when we see things like certain groups of people being treated unfairly, maybe causes that we care about not being taken seriously, racism, maybe when we look at people that don't have access to clean water, people who don't take care of the planet. When we see things happening in the world that aren't right, it is a good thing to get angry. And Jesus got angry when people were mistreated, like flipping the furniture angry. So it isn't always bad. In fact, sometimes anger is constructive because it moves us toward positive action. But then other times it's destructive. It moves us toward regret and hurts people. And what are we supposed to do with that? So either way, anger is a powerful emotion. And so the question is, what do we do with it? And how do we keep destructive anger from taking over and bossing us around? So we're going to look at a passage in the book of James in the New Testament. And James was actually the brother of Jesus, but when Jesus was alive and walked the earth, James actually didn't follow him. It was only after Jesus was crucified and came back to life that James was convinced. So eventually James became a leader in the early church. He lived in Jerusalem, and he wrote his letter primarily to the Jewish Christians. It's a letter full of wisdom, and in the section we're going to look at today, James offers a principle That may sound a little too simple at first, but hang in there, because if you and I can learn this, it'll change everything. So James starts by saying this: who is wise and understanding among you? Hear the word wise a lot, but we may not really focus on what it means. Wise is different from smart. You can be born smart, but wisdom is earned. If you are wise, you take what you've experienced and learn from it. You understand that life is connected and that actions have consequences. And James is asking, how many of you get that? If you do get it, here's what I have to say next. So he continues, let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. James is making a connection here. He's saying that wise people are humble. And what does humility look like? Well, it starts with a proper view of yourself. You don't see yourself as the exception to the rules. You don't think the world revolves around you and your desires. You don't think you deserve better treatment than everyone else, or you don't see everyone else as a means to an end that you want. So James is saying that wise people don't do these things. And so he continues, but if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Harbor basically means to let something stick around. If you let stuff stay with you that makes you think you're better or more important, don't deny it. Call it out. Don't pretend to be fine. And so James continues and says this: for where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But let's say it in a different way. When pride or arrogance gets lodged inside of us, it comes out in our actions. Which isn't exactly great news, but he doesn't leave us hanging. A couple verses later, James asks, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? In other words, your mom may drive you crazy, your little brother might be annoying, but what causes the arguments? It's not them, it's you. More specifically, it's what's in you. And this is a big deal, because as long as we think the problem is someone else, their behavior, their character, their mistake, we'll never deal with the anger problem inside of us. So we think the problem is people not doing things our way, but James is saying the problem is that we want to get our way. But as long as we think the problem is outside of us, we'll never take care of what's inside of us. And so you may disagree with this, because maybe you feel that things you want are things that have to be earned. So things like freedom, respect, trust, and responsibility. And when you don't get the things that you feel like you've earned, it doesn't seem fair. And you can definitely be right about that. But James isn't talking about what's fair and what isn't fair. He's saying that if you want to get to the root of your frustration and anger, you need to be willing to admit that the problem is in you. The problem is when you don't get what you think you deserve. So what do we do? Well, we have to change the script. When other people aren't acting like we think they should, or we aren't getting what we want or think we deserve, we have to change what we say. So instead of saying, he's being selfish, she's being annoying, they're being rude, instead we say, you know what the problem is? I'm not getting what I want. And as long as you're looking to other people as the reason for feeling the way you do, other people have control of your emotions. On the other hand, when you start admitting that the problem is that you are not getting what you want, you get that control back. So owning what you can own in the problem keeps your anger and frustration from driving you and owning you. And no matter who you are, that's a good thing. So, based on what we've talked about today, here's my question for you. What's your relationship with anger? Do you control it, or does it control you? The only way to beat the feeling of anger, according to James, is with humility. Even if you aren't the whole problem, humility means recognizing that you are part of the problem. And when you learn how to recognize that, the emotion of anger begins to lessen its control over you. And so the good news is that for those of us who are Jesus followers, we follow someone who has led the way in this. Jesus said no to getting his way. And in fact, the Apostle Paul wrote about this very thing when he talked about Jesus, who being in very nature, God did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. Jesus had every reason and every right to get his own way, but he didn't. He gave up what he wanted so that we could know how valuable we are in God's sight. And so Paul starts this passage about Jesus and his humility by saying this: "Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love." Did you catch that? He tells us to be like Christ. And then he tells us what Christ is like. Humble when he had every reason not to be. Jesus surrendered his way when he could have easily fought for it. And so following the example of Jesus is how we keep anger from controlling us. And so think of it this way. Because of Jesus, anger doesn't have to be the boss of you. I really believe following Jesus will make your life better. I do, because when you follow him, he will nudge you away from self-centeredness, arrogance, and pride, and move you toward humility and love for others. And as that happens, you'll find that anger no longer has the hold on you as it did before. And less powerful anger is a win for everyone. So as we wrap it up, I want you to begin imagining what life would look like if anger didn't control you. None of us will get this right completely or all the time. But as you discuss this, as you think about this, process some ways that you can take some steps in the right direction. In your personal circumstances, what would it like for you to choose wisdom and humility over anger?